just 2 weeks ago I considered myself completely rational. Today I record this video behind cold, creaking locks, windows covered tight against whatever lurks outside. The dim light in here barely cuts through the palpable dread that now fills this space. Why the sudden change? Because the urban legend I grew up hearing, the one dismissed as childhood fancy, turned out to be horrifyingly, undeniably real. I have to share what happened, hoping someone understands before it's too late. You hear stories growing up, don't you? Every town has them. Little fragments of weirdness, passed down until nobody quite remembers where they started. Local legends everyone knows, or thinks they know, but nobody really believes. They're just stories, campfire tales, things parents tell kids to keep them out of trouble. So what actually happens when one of those silly little stories starts writing itself into your life? In my hometown, we had the legend of the Shadow Stitcher. It wasn't a dramatic horror story, more quiet, almost quaint, centered around an abandoned tailor shop on Hemlock Lane in the old garment district. The story went that a lonely tailor's spirit just kept working. They said if you lingered near the boarded-up shop after dusk, the stitcher might notice a flaw in your clothes, a missing button, a loose seam, a tiny tear, and it would fix it, mended by phantom fingers. People would find buttons suddenly sewn back on, sometimes antique ones not their own. Or a rip would be perfectly darned days later with thread the color of twilight gray or deep shadow blue, as if stitched with captured shadows. Sometimes thimbles, needles, or spools of dark thread would just appear in pockets. Growing up, it was just background noise, folklore we laughed about. The Shadow Stitcher. Sounds harmless, right? We all assumed it was invented to make the decaying garment district seem more mysterious. But about a month ago, that old story made itself real. I was walking through that part of town, mostly deserted shells of old brick buildings now. I was taking photos, trying to capture the urban decay. I remember standing across from the old tailor shop on Hemlock Lane for a while, the one from the legend, its warped boards over the windows and peeling paint whispering of decades of decay. I didn't think anything of it. Later that evening, I got home and tossed my coat onto a chair. It wasn't until the next morning, grabbing it for work, that I saw it. A cold jolt went through me. Right there on the cuff was a button that wasn't mine. Small dark brass, intricately carved with tiny shears, looking incredibly old. It was sewn on tightly, meticulously, with dark gray thread. My coat didn't even have buttons on the cuffs. There was no tear, no snag mark. Just this impossible antique button suddenly part of my clothing. The narrator shifts uncomfortably, briefly touching their own cuff while talking, eyes darting slightly. A wave of unease washed over me. It felt deeply wrong, unsettling in a way I couldn't immediately name. It couldn't be the stitcher. That was ridiculous folklore. But seeing it, feeling the tight stitches, dread began to prickle at the back of my neck. I pulled the button off later that day, tossed it in a drawer, and tried hard to forget the chilling impossibility of it. A few nights after that, something else started. A sound. Very faint, almost subliminal unless the house was completely silent. A tiny rhythmic clicking. Click, 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 like needles tapping together. At first, I dismissed it as the house settling, old pipes, the heating system. Old houses make noises, especially when you live alone and you're tired. Your brain plays tricks. I convinced myself it was just stress. Work had been intense, I wasn't sleeping well. My mind was probably just magnifying anxieties, turning normal sounds into something else. It had to be. Just the house settling and me being overtired. Nothing, really. The narrator forces a smile, but the camera does a subtle push-in, revealing a tiny, barely visible strand of dark gray thread clinging to the edge of their shirt sleeve. But that was just the beginning. Things started getting harder to explain. When did it start? The feeling first, I think. That prickle on the back of your neck when you think you're alone. Then came the sound, a soundtrack to the paranoia. Click, 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 click. A faint, constant companion. It started following me. I'd hear it faintly at work, in the car, walking down the street. The threads appeared more often, like stray veins of shadow weaving through my ordinary life. I found a dark blue one tangled in my toothbrush bristles one morning. Another time, a long strand, the color of dusk, was tied in a tiny, perfect bow around my rearview mirror stem. Peripheral shadows stretched unnaturally, detached from objects, gone when I looked directly. Friends noticed. Chloe asked if I was sleeping. Mark said I obsessed over imaginary lint. I deflected, told them I was fine, just run down. But their concern felt distant, like they were talking to someone else. I tried researching the shadow stitcher, hoping understanding would make it stop. Hours spent in online forums, newspaper archives, the dusty local library, useless. The information was tangled, contradictory. A tailor driven mad by failure, killed in a fire, a benevolent spirit, or sometimes just a presence tied to the building. The lack of concrete answers only tightened the knot of anxiety in my chest. I felt increasingly separate. When Chloe called again, asking about coffee, I remember snapping at her. Something about being too busy, needing space. I insisted I had it under control. The truth, I couldn't let anyone see how frayed I was becoming. One evening, my bedroom door was shut. Strange, I always leave it open. The handle wouldn't turn. That specific dusky thread was wound tightly around the knob and frame, dozens of times, forming a complex knotted lock. My memory screams indignant rage. This thing in my house sealing my space. I yelled, wrenched the threads apart, felt them bite my fingers as I broke the door open. Visual. While the narration describes angry ripping, the camera shows the narrator's hands, calm and deliberate, carefully tying an identical intricate knot of gray thread around a different doorknob, perhaps a closet inside the bedroom. Their face is focused, almost serene, completely detached from the narrated emotion. The clicking seemed louder then, almost approving as I stood catching my breath, telling myself I'd dealt with it. After that, explanations felt thin, even to me. One minute I'd be certain it was stress, lack of sleep causing auditory and visual hallucinations. The next, the fear would grip me, the certainty that something unseen was meticulously, patiently, altering my surroundings, leaving its mark. I started wearing darker clothes, blacks, grays mostly. It felt safer somehow, less likely to show stray threads. My reflection grew unfamiliar, eyes shadowed, face drawn tight. The clicking became a near constant rhythm under everything else. Click, click, click. Sometimes it felt like it was coming from inside my own chest. Last night, lying awake in the dark house, listening to the silence and the clicking, I felt it first. A presence in the corner, near where my sewing kit spilled days ago. Darker than shadows, a silhouette drinking the moonlight filtering through the window. I couldn't make out features, just a shape, and it was working. Hands, or what I perceived as hands, moving with that same quiet, meticulous rhythm. I saw the faint glint of something small and sharp, a needle, catching the faint light. Click, click, click. Its shadow, cast by the moon, stretched impossibly long across the floorboards, reaching towards my bed. It was mending something, or maybe unraveling it. Visual. As the narrator describes the entity's actions, the hands moving, the glint, the shadow, the camera subtly shifts angle, catching the narrator's reflection in the darkened window pane. The reflection shows the narrator sitting up slightly in bed, their own hands making small, precise movements. Their own shadow stretches across the floor. They are holding something small, perhaps just a pen, or even nothing, just fingers pinching, that glints in the light. The clicking sound syncs perfectly with their hand movements. The narrator slowly looks directly into the camera, their previously agitated expressions smoothing into an unsettling calm. They raise one hand, palm open. Resting in the center is the small antique brass button with the carved shears. Their face is serene, almost peaceful. The stories we tell ourselves hold immense power. Sometimes, they gather enough weight to solidify into something tangible. Or maybe, perhaps, we are the ones who change, shaping ourselves until we fit the narrative we feared, or maybe secretly desired. Was it a spirit, stress, or something else entirely reweaving my reality? Did I unconsciously invite the legend in, letting it reshape me thread by thread? I don't have a clear answer. Perhaps some truths aren't meant to be found. Be careful which legends you entertain. Listening too closely has its price. You might just find yourself becoming the next dark chapter.